Thanks for having me and appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to listen to me speak about the Darknet and all the cool things I see on there. So give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen and just let me know if you can see everything. You should be seeing my presentation now.
Yes.
Fantastic. So I work for a company called DarkOwl. What we do is we have a user interface, a searchable user interface that we give to clients that want to search on the Darknet in a safe way. Going into a little bit about my background, though, before we go into what the Darknet is, how to use it for cybercriminal investigations, and etc. 1 second. So a little bit about my background. Yes, I have over 7 years as an open source intelligence investigator. I spent 4 years living in Amman, Jordan, and Abu Dhabi as well. And so some of the topics that I've focused on would be Arabic linguistics, counterterrorism, Darknet intelligence, social engineering, and cybercrime. One of the things I focus on right now, like my current job title, is Darknet intelligence expert and sales engineering team lead. It's a really, really long title, but kind of what my everyday looks like is I start out my day getting onto various Darknet forums and marketplaces, and I direct our collection team to collect from the most high value content, usually digital fraud goods, counterfeit items that are things that would be of interest to our clients. So spending a lot of time on the Darknet, and then also getting on calls and speaking to people to try to get them to pay for our platform. And I just also wanted to share that some of my other hobbies outside of this work, because it is pretty serious work, you have to make sure that you have fun outside of work. After I lived in the Middle East for several years, I returned back to Colorado, where I went to college. And I'm really big into backcountry skiing, as well as DJing underground parties and house music. So I'll move forward. And so as I'm going through the presentation here today, guys, we'll start out with a few slides, talk about what the Darknet is. As we're going through this, though, I would encourage you to stop me at any time if you have any questions. We might have some time for Q&A at the end as well, but if you guys have any questions, please feel free to stop me at any time. So what is the Darknet? Let me get a pulse in the room. Have any of you guys been onto the Darknet before or have heard of it? Feel free to respond. All right. Well, okay. So the surface net is what you guys would be most familiar with. This would be any websites that are indexed by search engines like Google, Bing, Yandex, etc. The deep net, that's just a layer further. It's still the same sites that you're accessing through those same search engines. However, you need some sort of credentials, username and password to get onto these sites. It could be Netflix, it could be social media. It could also be some criminal hacking forums that are accessible through the surface net. However, the part of the internet that we really focus on is here, the Darknet. So in order to get on the Darknet, it's still technically the same internet, but you need special software in order to access this hidden layer of the internet, which is used for anonymous communication, selling drugs or selling counterfeit items, and etc. This is the part of the internet that we really focus on at DarkOwl. Any questions on the Darknet before I move a little bit further? All right, fantastic. So to point out a couple more examples to help you guys understand the differences between the deep net and Darknet a little bit better, because it is a little bit confusing. The Darknet, you primarily access the Darknet using all of these software right here. The one that is most popular would be Tor, also known as the Onion Router. I2P is also popular, and same as ZeroNet. The deep net, as I mentioned, is still the same internet, but it's accessible through search engines like Google and Bing, and it can represent social media websites, Netflix, as well as some underground criminal forums that are not Darknet specific. That would be like Nold.to, which is a hacking forum. However, something that's really increasing the last several years would be the rise of direct messaging platforms. So criminals are obviously going to be living on the Darknet They'll be living on the deep web, but how are they communicating with each other? Are they just using these marketplaces and forums to talk to each other? Not necessarily. An app that we're seeing that is really on the rise right now is Telegram, and that's primarily because it's really, really easy to use. The cybercriminal ecosystem on Telegram is absolutely massive these days, whether it's right-wing extremism, Islamic extremism, activities we're seeing in Russia, Ukraine, and the invasion, misinformation, people selling Netflix accounts, and etc. Telegram's a really, really, really popular place for criminals these days. Moving along, let's talk a little bit about the history of the darknet. When was it created? Well, it was the Tor browser was created by the Naval Intelligence Unit and the CIA in the United States back in 2002. It was originally used as a way for agents to communicate with each other in the field. So primarily in places like Iran or Russia, right? So that's what the Tor browser was originally created for, was just for military intelligence and communication. Since then, it did evolve a little bit. It then evolved for agents to use the Tor browser to communicate with their family members. And then the next step was then the Tor board of directors allowing public use of the Tor browser for free speech, for activism, for journalism. And then obviously cybercriminal ecosystems quickly grew on here. So going into this a little bit further, Bitcoin was created in 2009. And that's what really facilitated the emergence of marketplaces and forums, because it allowed people to buy things and make transactions in an anonymous way. The first really big marketplace was Silk Road. If you guys are familiar with this, you might know the guy, the founder, Ross Ulbricht. There's a lot of good movies on Netflix or documentaries that you could probably find on YouTube about this instance. If you've not heard of Ross Ulbricht and Silk Road, highly encourage you to check out that story. It's quite fascinating. He ended up getting arrested by law enforcement in 2016, which marked the shutdown of the Silk Road. And I actually know some of the people who were involved in that investigation and the arrest of that individual. As the darknet has continued, we've seen an increase of law enforcement presence in the rise of something called honeypots. So when Ross Ulbricht and Silk Road founder was arrested, at that point, that is when we really saw an increasing presence of law enforcement on darknet marketplaces, forums, and etc. It really started with a lot of American-centric law enforcement presence, but quickly expanded to other countries. And I will tell you from personal experience, one of the most savvy NATO countries in terms of darknet investigations would definitely be the German government. The German government is very, very, very skilled with darknet cybercrime. And let's see what else here. Yeah, basically since 2020, that marked the 20th year that the darknet has been around. And the future of the darknet is really going to be interesting, because we will always see things like Tor, I2P will probably stick around. But as I mentioned, we're really seeing an increasing use of chat applications, which are not part of the darknet. But let's say you're a ransomware actor, you're definitely going to be using Telegram, just like you would those forums and marketplaces, and the .onion sites where you actually are hosting corporate leaked databases and things like that. All right, moving along. What type of content exists on the darknet? Well, there's a lot of different things on the darknet. I mean, if you guys have heard, maybe in the media, some things that are really popular in the media about the darknet would be like drugs or assassins for hire. And while those things definitely exist on there, it's not very actionable, especially for the kind of clients that we help and the kind of investigations that I am doing. The content that we're seeing is hacking related. So whether that's somebody that's developed an exploit for a specific tool, somebody's leaked source code for a particular company, or maybe somebody's sharing leaked databases that contain usernames and passwords associated with like admin credentials for a company. there's a lot of different things you can see on there: counterfeit items, passports, pilot certificates. I know some of my friends could have used that in the past, just buying an IELTS certificate on the darknet rather than taking that test. Cryptocurrency fraud, credit card fraud is super widespread. And then as well as, as I mentioned, drugs, weapons. There is quite a bit of child exploitation, child pornography material on the darknet as well, unfortunately. So pointing out some more additional examples and some of the things that we are able to collect when we're crawling from the darknet. So when we're crawling information from the darknet, we're not scraping pictures like this. We're just scraping the raw text. In this specific example, we're seeing somebody who's hosted this information on a .onion site, right? And this is I'm not sure how serious this threat was, but they were claiming to be targeting Donald Trump and Mike Pence for an assassination, and they actually included a QR code with a Bitcoin wallet address, and we were able to track that wallet. And this is really the kind of information that investigators use within our platform and our data to pull on strings and investigate individuals further. Because if you're able to identify a Bitcoin wallet with an individual on the darknet, you can search upon that Bitcoin wallet and see where else they might be using it, maybe on Telegram, a marketplace, or a forum, right? As I mentioned, there's a lot of counterfeit documents being sold on the darknet. During COVID, we saw a lot of COVID scams, tons of fake COVID documents, vaccinations, etc., vaccination cards. As well as we see passports, driver's license, IELTS certificates, and other things as well. I did mention that there is extremism presence in the darknet. Back really when ISIS was starting in 2014, they actually did have quite a big presence on a .onion site. However, today we're not seeing a very big presence of Islamic terrorists, Islamic extremist groups on the darknet itself. However, we do see quite a bit on Telegram. So this specific shot is from a group known as Jerusalem Electronic Army, which is loosely affiliated with some Hamas cyber groups. And this is them issuing out a target for a water sanitation facility in Israel. And these kind of attacks, cyber actors targeting industrial control systems for critical infrastructure is definitely something that's on the rise, right? We've seen that in Russia, Ukraine. We've seen it within the United States. And I can tell you from a federal government level within the United States, we're putting a lot of money and effort into building coalitions between agencies to monitor these type of things. Sometimes here at DarkOwl, we actually get agents who ask us specific questions about threats to critical infrastructure. So it's something that's on the minds of a lot of people these days. As I also mentioned, drugs are really big on the darknet, going back all the way to the beginning of Silk Road. That's what it was primarily used for. I would say it's, again, probably not the most popular part of the darknet these days. Like I said, it's going to be that hacking information, basically selling data on individuals and corporations. However, this specific screenshot is showing Alpha Bay Market, which is a really popular market that had temporarily gone offline after a law enforcement seizure and then did come back online in 2021. This is something that we've seen quite a bit in the last 2 years. I know recently 2 marketplaces that have been shut down, Genesis, as well as Monopoly Market. Something that a lot of people in my industry are very skeptical of is when a marketplace is offline by law enforcement seizure, whether it's Interpol or the United Nations Drug Enforcement or whatever it is, right? If that marketplace or forum returns at a certain point, we pretty much consider that to be co-opted by law enforcement. So probably the admin of that site has been arrested, and maybe they're using that admin for their, some of their skills and things like that, but they're continuing the existence of that market or forum for the primary purpose of collecting information on individuals and surveillance. I also mentioned credit card fraud, which is really, really, really widespread on the darknet. There's just huge databases out there that you can easily pay for, and I'll show you some examples of these momentarily. That include, credit card numbers, BIN numbers, as well as the personal the PII associated with the individual's bank account information. So that's really widespread in the darknet, as well as also people who are selling methodologies to target specific banks. Maybe it's check fraud, wire fraud, different types of fraud, but it's really widespread, not just to even, sell access to somebody's credit card information, but actually to sell access to information on how to commit fraud against a bank or a credit card company. Right here is an example of telecommunications fraud. This specific example looks like spoof calling in India. This is absolutely widespread, but I will tell you something that's even more widespread on the darknet, and especially places like Telegram, where this example is from, would be any company that has a large mobile application user base. So whether that's Coinbase, Netflix, Grubhub, Uber Eats, right? Those kind of companies are going to be targeted for fraud the most on the darknet. It's pretty funny, and a lot of the investigations that we're going through, from a government level, people are always asking about sophisticated nation state actors, but I'll tell you, the people that I interact with the most on the darknet are really eager, like 15 to 17-year-olds that are trying to become hackers. And for a long time, people weren't taking these individuals serious because they're like, how serious can you take a teenager? Well, I can tell you that most of the fraud of those companies I just mentioned, Uber Eats, and Netflix, and et cetera, that type of fraud is usually perpetrated by people in teenagers. And it's quite often for, people these days, when their parents aren't home, a 15-year-old hanging out with their buddies Friday night, rather than, maybe having previously 10 years ago trying to take money from their parents' purse, they'll actually try to steal somebody's Pizza Hut account on Telegram and get free pizza for the night. So kind of funny, the world that we're living in today, for sure. So different types of cryptocurrency used on the darknet. If you want to purchase something on the darknet, be it legal or illegal item, cryptocurrency is how you purchase that item anonymously. The 6 cryptocurrencies that are most used would be these ones: Bitcoin, Monero, Ethereum, Zcash, Dash, and Litecoin. There are others for sure, and you will actually see on one of the emerging parts of the darknet called Loki, they've actually created their own cryptocurrency within their network, which is pretty sweet. But yeah, cryptocurrency is the primary vehicle for illegal transactions on the darknet. And as I mentioned, monitoring cryptocurrency wallet address activity is a really, really good way to monitor cybercriminal activity. And when we're dealing with law enforcement, this is one of the primary vectors and the primary information that they're searching within our platform. So how do we get to the darknet? I had mentioned Tor, the onion router. This is the primary way people get to the darknet. As I mentioned, it was created all the way back in 2002. I'm sure it looked a little bit different. When you do get on the darknet, yes, there's like you can enter addresses above in the search bar, or you can search for DuckDuckGo. But the thing that you guys need to understand about the darknet is this is a community, right? And you can only find information if you become an active member of the community. And so what I'm trying to say is, if you want to search in that search bar, show me the top 10 criminal marketplaces, well, you're just not going to get anywhere. Usually if you're a new threat actor, you'll start on one site, and that's called Dread. Dread, D-R-E-A-D, is the Reddit equivalent of the darknet. And it's a great place for young hackers to start their journey and to find links to different marketplaces and forums, and basically to interact with users who might be vendors selling illegal items on those forums. Dread is kind of the starting point, if you will. but you need to know what the URL is for that. There might be a way you can use some open source Google dorking technique on Google to find some links for that. But it's really a need to know. And yeah, as you find more and more links, you get deeper and deeper into these communities. But to give you a little bit more history, the co-founder of the Tor project, his name was Andrew Lumen. He's widely viewed as the father of the Darknet. He was actually our CTO for several years here at DarkOwl and has since returned to the government to work on some confidential projects. There are other ways to get to the Darknet. I2P is really popular. This actually resurged in popularity since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So there's a huge, heavy Russian language cyber actor presence on this site. It's a lot more difficult to set up than Tor. If you want to set up the Tor browser, you really just need to have pretty basic understanding of setting up virtual machines, manually configuring proxies, and downloading the Tor browser, and using burner numbers and things like that. But I2P is a bit more technical in terms of setting up the server. And it's something that I'm actually trying to learn more this year, because it's a part of the Darknet that's been growing recently, especially with the Russian cyber threat actor community. There are other ways to get there. As you can see, there's a lot of different ways to access the Darknet. The one I primarily use is going to always be Tor, but also ZeroNet, Freenet. Freenet's been around a long time, really focused on censorship resistance. Tribler, and then these additional ones over here, which I have not used. I have used ZeroNet, Freenet, but I haven't used the rest of these guys. And there's emerging darknets. Not going to spend a ton of time on this. What you need to know is the darknet's evolving and changing constantly. I keep mentioning Loki, and that's because it's quite interesting, because they have their own cryptocurrency known as Oxen. IPFS is also quite popular, and I've seen it around quite a bit. Then just to tie everything up, how is Darknet data used in cyber investigations? Well, so Darknet intelligence is just one component of open source intelligence, right? OSINT, open source intelligence. There's social media intelligence, there's signals intelligence, there's private intelligence. There's a lot of different kinds of intelligence data feeds that investigators use to conduct investigations. Darknet data is really useful to add into the full spectrum of sources that you're using, so you can make informed decisions, strategic decisions, right? So if somebody's looking at somebody's username on a ClearNet, maybe on a social media website, maybe they're using a similar username on a Darknet forum. Some other tools, though, if you guys are interested in open source search techniques, Michael Basil's book right here. This guy is awesome. He is really knowledgeable. And he's got the most extensive book for all the different types of open source intelligence searching techniques. If you guys are interested in this stuff, highly encourage you to check him out. And here's a quick example of basically what I was explaining, searching a username on Google and then eventually leading onto Darknet forums. So the specific example, we found somebody had asked us about an individual who goes by the name of Ninja Shopper. So we first searched that on Google, found a YouTube page, and then we were able to find actually a Discord server where this individual has a presence, as well as another alias. Pretty funny video we found of this guy in his sunglasses over here and his long beard. Looks like a pretty typical sitting behind the computer threat actor. We were then able to find his GitHub account, which gave us more information, which eventually led us to this male avatar for unique sunglasses. And then searching for this username, these three usernames, I should say, we were able to find this individual's presence on Darknet forums like Nold, raid forums. Some personal information was leaked on raid forums. So this is just kind of showing you that these are the kinds of investigations that we're doing all day. Some of the other illegal activity you'll see out there: cyber espionage, threats to public officials, as I showed, child abusive materials, wildlife trafficking, domestic extremism, drug trafficking, threats against critical infrastructure, credit card fraud, telecommunications fraud, counterfeit documents, malware, and a lot more.